good to be here. Thank you for having me. So Robin van Puyenbroeck, Executive Director of Business Development at the World Trade Centers Association, based here in New York. Well, what makes them attractive is that it's the future, right? It's about how the traditional airport model can be reinvented, how we look at commercial and operational models, how we look at an airport, and we all fly, and we all, I hope, love to fly also, but how an airport becomes a destination and not as much just a transit point. So for that reason alone, as an investor, it's a very interesting model because we're not looking at, as I mentioned, traditional models of what's happening airports side, the air side, but what's happening around the actual airport, what kind of infrastructure is being developed, and it creates a different purpose for the infrastructure. And as we're all looking at how some airports, of course, have their moments of crisis, I always like to say that keep doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result is sort of insanity, right? So for investors, we always want to look at the future and make sure whatever models we build are future-proof. That's the $1 million question, right? So to say, well, there's many. And one is, of course, that it really needs proper planning. It's almost like it needs its own urban planning. It's not just about, oh, there's a lot of land, let's put a warehouse, or let's build something there. You want to literally build it out so it's functional, right? You look at the sustainability of it. You look at the carbon footprint of the place. You look at the logistics for traffic. Is it easy to reach? Is there parking, or what's the public infrastructure? What are the needs? So these things take time and effort. And I think what's very important in this model also is that it's done because it has to be done with all the stakeholders, which includes people that live in the vicinity of the airport. And that's why we see the models that work best is where they have a good partnership with the local government, with the provincial government, sometimes with the Air Force, with all stakeholders, because you're building a mini city, a mini economic zone actually around the airport. So that just needs more planning, more thinking, but that's again also an opportunity because you can actually create something new and create something experimental almost from a functionality point of view. I think the future for the model is very good. For the reasons, as again we mentioned, of diversification, it's risk mitigation. It's basically creating also non-airline and non-traditional non-passenger revenue actually for the infrastructure. And I see a lot of airports are now rethinking. We have all this either land or infrastructure, but it needs to start serving more than what we're traditionally used to. How can you make sure that your cargo or your retail is adapting to e-commerce today? Right? There's different needs. Travelers have different needs. All of a sudden, people are then working in the vicinity of the airport. Again, it becomes its own mini ecosystem. Well, I think they're adapting very well. Like this is a place where you have an entire infrastructure built immediately around the airport with hotel infrastructure. So there's hospitality, there's place for people to work, there's offices, there's even childcare. There's a clinic on the side. So it becomes a destination. And even in times of COVID and where people have certain concerns about going to other places, you can actually people meet now at the airport, right? And it's not in the coffee shop next to the gate. No, you leave the gate, you leave the air side of the airport, and walking distance, you have an entire city infrastructure almost available. So it creates a different level of safety as well, of security. So it has its own ecosystem, its own economy. It's right there. So for that reason alone, for reason of diversification, of risk mitigation, it is, I think, very well positioned to withstand shocks from very different angles. This is about how you manage risk. right? And how you deal with a changing situation and how you deal with risk. So the fact that you diversify away from passenger or airline revenue alone, basically, and you're looking to diversify that into income from being a landlord, income from hospitality, income from a variety from commercial real estate, that in its own right makes you more sort of future-proof and reduces your risk considerably. So, which means if a shock comes from passenger traffic, like we've seen during COVID, well, if that's your main stream of revenue, your model just stops, right? Your economic model. If you have a more diversified economic model, a revenue model, well, one balances out the other. We've seen that I mentioned in Vienna. People work there. There's offices, there's a whole infrastructure, and the moment people went back to work, they go back to work. So that makes them much more, how would I say, much stronger, and that's what it all comes down to: risk mitigation and diversification of operations, and the ability to reinvent yourself.